By just reading out what Kenny Roberts said about it. He said, as a rider and as a character, he had it all. Courage, determination, intelligence, decency, honesty, and of course skill. I think that's brilliant.
I don't think he told the truth.
Right. Right, let's start off with the family. Sandy and your mother Isla. Sandy was obviously a massive influence on you in those early days.
Well, of course, yeah. Sandy, my father, he raced soapbox derby as a kid, and then when the Japanese brought out the Yamahas, I think it was the 80, I think back in 1960, I think it was, he started riding motorcycles, and it went from there.
And he used to go out riding in the desert. He did that hare and hounds thing, which all seems a bit weird to us in the UK, where you just tear off for an hour and a half and nobody sees you, and then you come back again. Tell us all about that, because you used to go there as a kid.
Yeah, it's quite out in the Mojave Desert in California. You know, there's a lot of desert out there, but what my father used to do to learn how to get good bike control was that he would just ride through the desert and through the cactuses and stuff, and all of a sudden a jackrabbit would jump up out of one of the bushes, and he'd start trying to chase that jackrabbit down. So that's how he learned how to start riding a bike.
So your mother Ida, was she protective? Did she want you to start racing or not?
It's a funny story. My mother actually said she was racing go-karts, and the story goes she was pregnant. So she found out she was pregnant when she broke her arm racing a go-kart. So I guess I was the one.
Right. So and you had a brother Rodney, and he had got an unusual motorcycle racing style. He was a balls out kind of a rider. Tell us about him.
Yeah, I have a younger brother, Rodney. He's, I guess when my mother watched us race from the grandstands, she could watch how I would race, and she felt pretty calm about it. But when my brother was out there riding, she was nervous as heck. He always looked like he was anything but in control. Yeah, but whenever my brother raced and he got beat, he would always go over and want to fight the kid that beat him.
Now, we start off with your first race. What was that on? Can you remember?
Oh, I remember exactly what it was. It was a Honda Z50 Mini Trail.
And did your mother approve of that? Did she think that was a good idea?
You know, I think at that time, that was back in 1969, a long time ago. So as far as what my mother thought, I only remember what my dad was thinking, and he was the guy kind of pushing this thing. So I think she went along with it.
Right. But your dad, Sandy, was a terrific tuner of bikes, and he didn't like going along the normal path where everyone, as you went, you progressed from the 50 Honda, and everybody was going on the 100 Yamaha. Your father decided a 90 Suzuki was the way to go, and he'd make it special. How was it compared with the Yamahas?
Well, I tell you though, before even that was, as we rode that in the U.S., we had this class. It was considered 1 to 3 horsepower, and the age limit was you had to be 9 to 11 years old, and the actual bike that I raced, the Honda, was considered 3 horsepower, a Honda 50. But I was racing against a Tecumseh, like a lawnmower engine bike, a Powell mini bike, and it was considered 3 horsepower also, but it had 120 cc's. And every week, the actual guy that rode that, his name was Kelly Moran, a speedway rider. And but anyways, we couldn't stay up with them. They had much more cc's than we had. So my father jerked me out of the 3rd grade and said, "I've got something new for you to test." And we went to this Saddleback Park, and he had actually put my mini bike on nitromethane. So we never had a problem with that Powell mini bike after that.
It was like an on-off switch.
That thing was a beast. I mean, I think we probably had triple the horsepower of what it started with.
Because I read the book about you, and I thought one of the really nicest things was when you had a cat, when it died. Tell me about its burial.
Well, my father always wanted to do, make me ride something that nobody else was riding. So if everybody rode Yamahas, I had to ride a Suzuki, or if they were on Kawasaki's, I was on a Bultaco or something. So, but we had a 90cc Suzuki that when he got done working on it, I think the thing revved to like almost 15,000 RPM. It revved so high that it wouldn't shift. I'd have to let the RPMs come down so we could shift it. And for a year and a half, I think, we never finished a race. But we had a big lead at every single one of those. So so my father, I remember he had saved $50 and we had this special conrod made out of a special material. And I remember thinking spending that $50 was like, to my family, it was like $20,000. And that rod lasted 16 laps. So that was it for my father and that bike. He took that engine, and we had a black cat called Suzuki. And the cat died a couple weeks before that engine did, so he buried them both together.
Well, that's a fantastic story. And your sister, is it Rainey? Did you call her Rainey?
We call her Renee.
Renee, right, I'll not get that wrong again. And you met Eddie Lawson, who was 2 years older than you. And how did you rate Eddie Lawson in those younger days? And do you remember the boots he wore?
Yeah, you did read that.
I did.
You know, I think about 1970 is when I met Eddie Lawson for the first time, and we were at this racetrack called Trojan Speedways in Southern California. And he was riding a mini bike called the Tarbo, and I was riding that souped up Hondo. But I remember Eddie very, very well because he was the only kid in the mini bike class that had white leathers, completely white, and his steel shoe was chrome, and it shot sparks off it when he put his foot down. And so I thought that was pretty cool. I asked my dad if I could have one of those kinds of steel shoes.
He said no. Now, you went to the half miles and in Kentucky, in Louisiana, Louisville, Kentucky rather, and you watched your hero Jay Springsteen win on a Harley. And you went out and your junior ride the next day on a Yamaha. And you was actually lapped faster than your hero. I found that pretty amazing.
So did I.
How come you could ride that fast being so young?
Well, you know, I think, you know, I was blessed with some talent, obviously, but I really enjoyed dirt tracking, and I really enjoyed riding tracks that were really deep cushions. And this track in Louisville, Kentucky was the surface was pea gravel. It was like a horse track, and with it being super deep cushion, we ran Pirelli tires front and rear, and we put in this. We would cut the tire with razor blades. We'd actually put in this cut on the tire. We called it a traction cut, and so this thing would take that pea gravel and we just have a ton of grip. And but we could put that. I just really enjoyed where everybody else shut the throttle off. I just love leaving it on much longer than them.
Brilliant. And to help finance your racing, you work for your dad. Tell us all about that. How do you get on working for Dad?
Oh, I hated it. My father was he was a construction manager as a carpenter, and so I had to work for him. So I always had to be the first one on the job because I rode with my father. So we were there at 5 o'clock in the morning. We'd have to get the fire going in the mornings, and we were the last ones to leave. And every time I saw my father around the work site, he always made sure that I didn't have my hands in my pockets. That's for sure.
And then, age 16, you started racing nationwide, and you drove yourself at that young age. Is that right?
Oh yeah, it was the best time of my life, I think, as far as racing was concerned, because I had a Dodge van.
It wasn't just an ordinary Dodge, though, was it?
No,
to us it would be like one hell of a tool.
Yeah, this Dodge had a 440 Hemi in it, V8. I ripped the motor mounts out of it about every 2,000 miles. 16-year-old with too much horsepower. And we would race. I raced, I think that year we raced about 50 races across the U.S. And I would have to win the race to go on to the next race. And back at that time, when you won the race, it was only $20. So we would have $15 put in the fuel tank. And then I had a buddy of mine from the neighborhood helping me drive. And we would split that to go eat McDonald's or wherever. And with some of the other racers that was racing with me at the time, we'd all save money about once a week to get a hotel room so we could shower.
And Eddie Lawson went with you at that time as well. Of those 2 years you've seen you sort of went together. And how was it? How did that work out?
I did all the driving. He did all the sleeping. And I know he says the opposite, but that's really the story.
You had your first massive crash, at your first accident, when you were 19, you had a massive crash. Now, your recuperation period ended up, your brother was recuperating and your sister was recuperating at the same time. What the hell's going on there with the Rainey?
Yeah, we had a bit of a rough patch there, I think. You know, circumstances, especially with my sister. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she was, hit by a stray boat, come up on the shore and hit her. So that was kind of a real tough time for our family. But my brother was riding a motorcycle out there in the desert, fell down and had broken his neck, but fortunately he didn't have any kind of paralysis. But he was only about, I think he was about 14 or something. And then I was on the Harley Davidson riding the San Jose Mile, big mile oval, and right at the end of the straightaway, about 130 mile an hour, the rear tire blew out. And I just remember going into the corner, and then I remember laying on the track looking up, seeing my father, and asking him, "Where am I?"